The space station hung in orbit around the red planet like a metal flower against the black sky. Inside its white corridors, beings from 12 different worlds walked together, their various shapes and sizes making the hallways look like a strange parade. Lihanna pressed her face against the observation window and watched the planet below turn slowly, its surface marked by a huge red scar that stretched across one entire continent. "Still looking at that thing?" Park Min-ho asked as he joined her at the window. His coffee mug steamed in the recycled air of the station. "You have been staring at it for 3 days now." Hana nodded and pointed down at the red mark on the planet's surface. "The Crimson Wasteland, 2,000 kilometers of the most dangerous terrain in known space, and we still do not understand why nothing can cross it safely." "Nothing can cross it quickly, you mean?" Min-ho said. "The Altarians made it across eventually. Took them over 3 years, but they did it." 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, came a deep voice behind them. Ambassador Veltar approached with his usual, careful steps. The tall blue alien's forearms moved gracefully as he spoke. "My people lost 47 explorers learning how to cross that wasteland. It nearly broke our spirits." Hana turned from the window to face the ambassador. "But you did cross it. What was the secret?" Veltar's large black eyes reflected the station lights. "Patience. Massive supply chains. Technology that could resist the energy storms. We built relay stations every 50 kilometers and moved our people in small groups with heavy protection. Even then, the wasteland fought us every step. The Zenthari took almost as long," Dr. Crix added, floating up to them on his anti-gravity platform. His gray skin looked pale under the artificial lights, and his 6 tentacle arms moved constantly as he spoke. 2 years, 10 months, 4 days. We lost 31 brave souls to those reality storms that twist space itself." Minho sipped his coffee and looked thoughtful. "What exactly makes it so dangerous down there? I have read the reports, but they all say different things." Dr. Crix's tentacles writhed with excitement as he began to explain. "The wasteland generates energy fields that drain power from any technology more complex than a simple battery. Our ships die within hours. Our communication equipment fails. Even our basic life support systems begin to malfunction. The gravitational anomalies are worse," Veltar added. "Pockets of space where gravity suddenly becomes 10 times stronger or disappears completely. Our vehicles get crushed or thrown into the sky without warning. And the reality storms," Dr. Crix continued. "Waves of quantum distortion that make navigation impossible. Instruments show north pointing in 4 different directions at once. Time itself moves strangely in some areas." Hana listened to all this and frowned. "But the planet is beautiful beyond the wasteland, right? That is why everyone wants to cross it?" "Oh yes." Veltar's voice became dreamy. "The far continents are rich beyond imagination. Rare minerals, perfect farmland, cities that could house billions. But the wasteland guards it all like a sleeping dragon." "The Kelvorans tried to go around it," Dr. Crix said. "Their ships can survive in space longer than most. They attempted to fly over the wasteland at high altitude." "What happened?" Minho asked. "The energy storms reach up into the atmosphere. They lost 12 ships before giving up. Eventually they crossed on foot like the rest of us, but it took them over 4 years." Hana walked back to the window and stared down at the red wasteland again. She had been studying it for weeks now, reading every report and watching every video the various alien species had recorded during their crossings. Something about their approach seemed wrong to her, but she could not put her finger on what it was. "Have any biological surveys been done?" she asked. "I mean, detailed studies of how living things react to the wasteland compared to technology." Dr. Crix's tentacles stopped moving for a moment. "Biological surveys? Why would we waste time on that? Every species that has tried to cross has used their best technology. Biology is too weak, too unreliable for such dangers." "But technology keeps failing down there," Hana pointed out. "Maybe biology would work better." Veltar made a sound that might have been laughter in his species. "Young human, I respect your curiosity, but you must understand the scale of what we are discussing. The Wasteland has defeated the combined efforts of 12 advanced civilizations. We are talking about distances that would take primitive walking many weeks to cover, through conditions that would kill any unprotected biological form within hours. Besides, Dr. Crix added, humans are a young species. You have not yet developed the technological sophistication needed for such undertakings. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when your people have advanced beyond your current primitive state, you might contribute something useful to this problem. Hana felt her cheeks grow warm, but she kept her voice calm. How long would it take a human to walk 2,000 kilometers on Earth? Minho looked surprised by the question. Walk? I suppose if someone was in good shape and walked 10 hours, a day, maybe 2 or 3 months. But Hana, that is on safe, familiar ground with supply stations and medical help available. What if someone ran instead of walked? Hana asked. Ran 2,000 kilometers. Veltar's forearms gestured in what Hana had learned was their equivalent of shaking a head. Impossible. No biological form could sustain such effort over such distance. Dr. Crix's gray skin seemed to grow paler. Even if such a thing were theoretically possible, which it is not, the Wasteland would kill any biological form long before they could cross even 1/10 of the distance. Hana turned back to the window and studied the planet below. The red Wasteland looked angry and dangerous from orbit, but she had grown up running through forests and mountains on Earth. She had completed marathons in desert heat and Arctic cold. Her body was designed by millions of years of evolution to cover vast distances on foot. I think I could jog across it in a day, she said quietly. The silence that followed her words was so complete that she could hear the station's ventilation systems humming. Then Dr. Crix began making a sound like steam escaping from a broken pipe, which she realized was laughter. A day? Veltar's voice rose to a pitch she had never heard from him before. My dear child, you cannot be serious. The greatest civilizations in the galaxy have spent years developing the technology and logistics needed to cross that wasteland, and you think you could simply run across it like some kind of athletic event? Typical human arrogance, Dr. Crix said between his steam pipe laughs. They arrive in galactic civilization yesterday and immediately think they can solve problems that have challenged advanced species for centuries. Other aliens in the observation area had begun to gather around them, drawn by the unusual sounds of Dr. Crix's laughter and Veltar's high-pitched voice. Soon a crowd of various species was listening to the conversation. What is this about jogging? Asked Captain Yulmuth, whose insect-like form clicked as she moved. The human thinks she can run across the Crimson Wasteland in a single day, Veltar explained. The clicking sounds Captain Yulmuth made were clearly laughter in her species. How wonderfully naive. I suppose when you are a primitive species you do not understand the true dangers of the universe. Hana felt her face growing warmer, but she kept her voice steady. Has anyone ever tried crossing it without all the heavy technology? Just a biological being with basic supplies? Of course not, Dr. Crix said. That would be suicide. The energy fields alone would disorient any biological nervous system within hours. The gravitational anomalies would tear apart any unprotected body. The reality storms would drive any thinking mind to madness. But what if those things only affect complex technology? Hana asked. What if a simple biological system could adapt to them? Impossible, Veltar said firmly. Biology is weak and limited. Technology is what separates advanced civilizations from primitive ones. The wasteland requires the most sophisticated equipment we can develop, not the crude biological forms that evolution happened to produce. Hana looked around at all the alien faces staring at her with expressions that ranged from amusement to pity. She realized that to them, she was just a primitive human who did not understand how the real universe worked. They saw biology as something to be overcome with technology, not as a tool that might have its own advantages. Well, she said finally, I suppose we will never know unless someone tries it. Indeed, Dr. Crix said, his tentacles curling with satisfaction. And I suspect no one will be foolish enough to make such an attempt. As the crowd of aliens dispersed, still making their various sounds of amusement, Hana remained at the window, staring down at the red wasteland. Beside her, Minho finished his coffee in thoughtful silence. "You are actually thinking about it, are not you?" he said finally. Hana smiled. "Maybe." The station's chronometer showed 05:47 hours when Hana finished lacing up her running shoes. She had chosen her lightest pair, the ones with the best grip and cushioning that had carried her through countless kilometers on Earth. Her backpack held 2 liters of water, energy bars, a basic medical kit, and a simple camera that used old-fashioned chemical film instead of digital sensors. Park Minho was still sleeping in his quarters when she left him a message on the basic communication pad beside his bed. "Gone for my morning exercise, back by dinner. Do not worry." She knew he would worry anyway, but she also knew he would understand eventually. The shuttle bay was empty except for the night shift maintenance crew, who barely looked up as she walked toward the planetary descent vehicle. The pilot, a sleepy Altarian named Kevtar, did not question her request for transport to the planet's surface. Humans often went down to collect samples and run tests, and dawn was a common time for such work. "Where do you want to be dropped off?" Kevtar asked as they descended through the atmosphere. "The edge of the Crimson Wasteland," Hana said. "The northern approach point where the research teams usually set up their base camps." Kevtar's forearms moved over the controls with practiced ease. "Ah, more Wasteland research. I hope you have better luck than the last team. They spent 6 months preparing for a crossing attempt and only made it 50 kilometers before their equipment failed." The shuttle touched down on the red sand at the wasteland's edge, just as the planet's sun rose above the horizon. The light turned everything the color of rust and blood, and Hana could see heat waves already beginning to rise from the ground even though it was early morning. "I will be back to pick you up at sunset," Kevtar said. "Try not to go too far into the wasteland alone. The research teams always lose people who venture in without proper preparation." Hana shouldered her backpack and stepped out of the shuttle. The air was thin but breathable, and she could taste dust and metal in every breath. The ground beneath her feet was hard-packed sand mixed with strange crystalline formations that crunched as she walked. She began with a gentle warm-up jog, letting her body adjust to the planet's slightly lower gravity and thinner atmosphere. The wasteland stretched ahead of her like a red ocean, broken by strange rock formations and the occasional flash of energy discharge in the distance. The first energy storm hit her about 10 kilometers into the wasteland. She felt it coming as a tingling in her skin and a strange taste in her mouth, like copper pennies and ozone. The alien research reports had described these storms as devastating to electronic equipment, causing complete system failures and disorientation. 2. Hana. It felt like running through a thunderstorm. The air around her crackled with purple electricity, and she could see waves of distortion moving across the landscape like heat mirages. But her body kept running, her heart kept beating, and her sense of direction remained clear. The storm was certainly unusual, but it was not the technological apocalypse the aliens had described. She maintained her pace, breathing steadily and letting her body find its rhythm. This was what she had been born to do, what her species had evolved for over millions of years. Humans were persistence hunters who had chased prey across vast distances until their targets collapsed from exhaustion. Her cardiovascular system, her cooling mechanisms, her muscle structure, all of it was designed for exactly this kind of sustained effort over long distances. The first gravitational anomaly nearly caught her by surprise. She was running across what looked like normal ground when suddenly her body felt 3 times heavier. Her pace slowed, but she adjusted her stride and kept moving. A few hundred meters later, the effect reversed, and she felt so light that each step carried her forward like she was bouncing on the moon. The alien reports had described these gravity changes as deadly traps that crushed vehicles or flung them into the sky, but Hana's body was flexible and responsive in ways that rigid technology was not. When gravity increased, she shortened her stride and leaned forward. When it decreased, she lengthened her stride and used the reduced weight to cover more ground with each step. By noon, she had covered nearly half the distance across the wasteland. She stopped to rest in the shade of a strange crystal formation that looked like frozen lightning, drinking water and eating an energy bar while she took pictures of the bizarre landscape around her. The alien scientists would find these images fascinating, she thought. They showed details that the failed expeditions had never been able to document because their equipment kept breaking down. The reality storms were the strangest phenomenon she encountered. These were the distortions that the aliens described as making navigation impossible, causing instruments to give contradictory readings and driving explorers to madness. When the first one hit her, Hannah felt like she was running through a funhouse where the laws of physics had gone on vacation. Her shadow pointed in 3 different directions at once. The sun appeared to be both rising and setting simultaneously. Rock formations seemed to shift and change shape as she watched them. For a moment, she thought she saw the space station hanging in the sky directly ahead of her, impossibly close and detailed. But underneath all the visual chaos, her body kept running. Her feet found solid ground even when her eyes saw impossible geometries. Her inner ear maintained her sense of balance even when the horizon tilted at crazy angles. The human brain, evolved to navigate complex and changing environments, simply filtered out the impossible and focused on what was real. She realized that the reality storms were not actually changing reality at all. They were electromagnetic, disturbances that interfered with complex sensor systems and data processing equipment. To sophisticated alien technology, they were indeed devastating. But to a biological organism with simple sensory systems and intuitive navigation, they were just another form of weather to adapt to. The temperature began climbing as the afternoon progressed, and Hannah felt grateful for her species' superior cooling system. Humans were among the best distance runners in Earth's animal kingdom, partly because they could regulate their body temperature so effectively through sweating. While alien technology overheated and shut down in the wasteland's extreme temperatures, her body simply adjusted its cooling output and kept running. She passed the wreckage of several alien expeditions during the afternoon, crashed vehicles, abandoned supply depots, and the twisted remains of sophisticated equipment that had failed under the wasteland's harsh conditions. She took pictures of everything, knowing that the research teams would want to study how their technology had been affected. At one point, she came across a Xanthari research probe that was still partially functional. The small robot was trapped under a collapsed crystal formation, its anti-gravity system damaged and its communication array destroyed. Following her basic rescue training, Hannah cleared away the crystals and lifted the probe onto her back. It was heavy, but she had carried heavier loads during wilderness survival exercises on Earth. The probe's basic sensors were still working, and she could hear it making excited beeping sounds as it recorded data about the wasteland from its new mobile platform. She imagined Dr. Crix's surprise when the probe eventually made it back to the research station, with a complete record of a successful wasteland crossing. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Hannah found herself approaching the far edge of the wasteland. The red sand gradually gave way to normal brown soil, and she could see green vegetation in the distance. The energy storms became less frequent, the gravitational anomalies weaker, and the reality distortions faded away entirely. She checked her watch as she jogged out of the wasteland and onto the grassy plains beyond. 14 hours and 23 minutes since she had started running from the northern edge. Not her best marathon time, but respectable considering the unusual terrain and the fact that she had covered nearly 50 times the distance of a normal marathon. The Xanthari probe on her back beeped happily as it recorded the normal gravitational readings and stable electromagnetic fields of the safe zone beyond the wasteland. Hannah set it down carefully and patted its metal surface. There you go, little friend. Tell Dr. Crix that humans say hello. She pulled out her communication device, a simple radio transmitter that was too basic to be affected by the wasteland's energy fields. Hannah to research station. I have successfully crossed the Crimson Wasteland on foot, requesting pickup at the southern edge coordinates. The response was immediate and confused. Research station to Hannah. Please repeat your last transmission. Did you say you crossed the wasteland? Confirmed. Full crossing. Northern edge to southern edge in 14 hours and 23 minutes. I have extensive photographic documentation and one rescued Xanthari probe. There was a long silence on the radio, followed by frantic chatter in several alien languages. Finally, Kevtar's voice came through clearly. Hana, this is impossible. No one crosses the Wasteland in less than a year, and certainly not on foot in a single day. Well, Hana said, sitting down on the grass to rest while she waited for pickup. I suppose no one told the Wasteland that it was supposed to be impossible. She looked back at the red expanse she had just crossed and felt a deep satisfaction. Her body was tired, but not exhausted. The shuttle bay had never been so crowded. Word of Hana's impossible journey had spread through the research station faster than the energy storms that swept across the wasteland below. Aliens from every species aboard the station pressed forward as the rescue shuttle's doors opened, their various forms creating a sea of eyes, tentacles, arms, and other appendages all focused on one exhausted human woman. Hana stepped out of the shuttle carrying her backpack and the rescued Zenthari probe, looking like she had just returned from a difficult but routine hiking trip. Her running clothes were dusty and stained with the red sand of the wasteland, and her face was sunburned despite the protective cream she had used, but she was clearly alive and uninjured. The crowd fell silent as she walked past them toward the decontamination chambers. Behind her, Kevtar emerged from the shuttle shaking his four-armed head in disbelief. I picked her up exactly where she said she would be, he announced to the assembled crowd. On the southern edge of the wasteland, sitting in the grass like she was waiting for a bus. She had photographs, samples, and that probe. He gestured toward the small robot that Hana carried. I do not understand how this is possible. Ambassador Veltar pushed through the crowd, his tall blue form towering over most of the other aliens. This is clearly some kind of mistake. Perhaps she found a hidden passage, or used some sort of advanced human technology that we do not know about. What technology? Dr. Crix demanded, his tentacles writhing with agitation. I have studied human capabilities extensively. They are a primitive species with basic tools and simple machines. They do not possess anything that could overcome the wasteland's effects on complex systems. Then explain how she accomplished something that our combined civilizations have spent decades trying to achieve, Veltar said. His voice carried the strain of someone whose fundamental understanding of the universe had just been challenged. Park. Minho had been waiting near the decontamination chambers when the shuttle arrived. As Hana emerged from the cleaning process wearing fresh clothes, he approached her with a mixture of relief and exasperation. I got your message about going for exercise, he said. I thought you meant a jog around the station's exercise track, not a sprint across the most dangerous terrain in known space. Hana smiled and handed him the rescued probe. I brought back a souvenir. I think Dr. Crix will be happy to get this back. Hana, Minho said seriously, the entire station is in chaos. Half the aliens think you are lying, and the other half think you have somehow cheated. They are demanding investigations, sensor verification, and proof that you actually did what you claim. I have photographs, Hana said, patting her backpack. And that probe recorded sensor data for the entire journey. Plus, Kevtar confirmed my pickup location. That is not enough for them. They want to know how you survived the energy storms that destroy their equipment. They want to understand how you navigated through reality distortions that drive their explorers insane. They want proof that a biological organism could accomplish something their advanced technology cannot. Before Hana could respond, Ambassador Veltar approached them with Dr. Crix floating beside him on his anti-gravity platform. Both aliens looked deeply disturbed, as if someone had just told them that the laws of physics had been repealed. We need to speak with you immediately, Veltar said to Hana. This situation requires investigation and explanation. They gathered in the station's main conference room, which quickly filled with representatives from every species aboard the station. Hana found herself sitting at the center of a circle of alien faces, all staring at her with expressions ranging from skepticism to wonder to outright hostility. Let us begin with the basic facts, Dr. Crix said, his tentacles moving, in formal patterns that indicated serious discussion. You claim to have crossed the Crimson Wasteland in approximately 14 hours, is this correct? 14 hours and 23 minutes, Hana confirmed. I started at sunrise from the northern edge and reached the southern edge just before sunset. And you accomplished this on foot carrying only basic supplies? Running, actually. And yes, just water, food, medical supplies, and a camera. A ripple of sounds went around the room as the various aliens expressed their disbelief in their respective languages. Captain Yulmoth's clicking was particularly loud. "The energy storms alone should have killed you within hours," she said. "They drain power from any complex system and create electromagnetic pulses that disrupt nervous systems." "I felt them," Hana said. "They made the air tingle and taste strange, but they did not stop me from running." "Impossible," Dr. Crick said, flatly. "Centauri explorers exposed to those storms suffered complete nervous system collapse within minutes." "Maybe Centauri nervous systems are more complex than human ones," Hana suggested. "Maybe the storms only affect sophisticated biological or technological systems." Veltar leaned forward, his black eyes reflecting the conference room lights. "What about the gravitational anomalies? Our vehicles have been crushed or thrown into orbit by sudden gravity changes." "I felt those too. When gravity got stronger, I slowed down and adjusted my stride. When it got weaker, I used the reduced weight to cover more distance with each step." "You adjusted your stride?" Captain Yulmoth's clicking sound became higher, pitched. "Gravitational forces that can destroy armored vehicles, and you simply adjusted your stride?" "I am flexible in ways that vehicles are not," Hana pointed out. "Biological systems can adapt to changing conditions much faster than mechanical ones." The room erupted in a cacophony of alien languages as the various species debated among themselves. Finally, Veltar called for order. "Even if we accept that you somehow survived the energy storms and gravitational anomalies," he said, "the reality storms would have made navigation impossible. Our most sophisticated instruments cannot determine direction during those distortions." "Do not navigate with instruments," Hana said. "I use my eyes, my sense of balance, and my intuition. When reality looked impossible, I ignored what I was seeing and trusted what my body was telling me." "Your body?" Dr. Crick's tentacles stopped moving entirely. "You navigated through quantum distortions using biological intuition?" "It worked, did it not?" The silence that followed was so complete that Hana could hear the station's life support systems humming. Then Veltar spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "If what you are saying is true, then everything we thought we knew about the Wasteland is wrong. We have been trying to solve a technological problem with more technology, when the solution requires less technology, not more. Or no technology at all," Hana added. "Just biology doing what it evolved to do." "This is madness," Captain Yulmoth said. "We are advanced civilizations with sophisticated science and engineering. We do not solve problems by reverting to primitive biological functions." "But what if primitive biological functions are exactly what this problem requires?" Park Minho asked. He had been silent during most of the discussion, but now he leaned forward with interest. "What if the Wasteland is specifically hostile to complex systems but harmless to simple ones?" "Prove it," Dr. Crick said suddenly. "If this is really so simple, prove it by doing it again." The room fell silent again as everyone turned to look at Hana. She realized that all the alien eyes, sensors, and other detection organs were focused on her with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "You want me to cross the Wasteland again?" she asked. "Yes," Veltar said. "If you can repeat this accomplishment, if you can demonstrate that it was not just luck or coincidence, then we will have to reconsider everything we thought we knew about biological versus technological solutions." Hana looked around the room, at all the skeptical alien faces. She realized that no amount of photographic evidence or sensor readings would convince them. They needed to see it happen again, preferably with their own instruments monitoring every step of the journey. "I need to get back to the station anyway," she said finally. "The shuttle dropped me off on the far side of the Wasteland, but my quarters are here. So, yes, I can cross it again to come home." "Immediately?" Dr. Crick asked. Hana checked the station. Chronometer on the wall. "It is early evening now. If I start at dawn tomorrow, I should be back by sunset. We will monitor your journey with every sensor we have," Veltar said. "Long-range scanners, orbital observation platforms, communication, relays. If you are truly doing what you claim, we will document every moment of it. And if I am not, then we will know that humans are capable of deception on a scale we had not previously imagined." Captain Yulmuth said coldly. Hana stood up from her chair and stretched muscles that were still sore from her first crossing. Fair enough, I could use another good run anyway. All this sitting in meetings is bad for my conditioning. As the aliens began to disperse, making plans for their monitoring efforts and discussing the implications of what they might witness, Park Min-ho approached, Hana with a concerned expression. You do not have to do this, he said quietly. You have already proven your point. Have I? Hana looked around at the departing aliens. They still think it was impossible. They still believe that advanced technology is always superior to simple biology. Maybe it is time someone showed them that evolution can be just as sophisticated as engineering, just in different ways. And if something goes. The research station's main laboratory had been converted into what looked like a military command center. Dozens of monitoring screens covered every wall, showing sensor readings, orbital imagery, and tracking data from across the Crimson Wasteland. Aliens from every species aboard the station crowded around workstations, their various appendages working frantically over control panels as they tracked one small human figure moving steadily across the red landscape below. Target is maintaining consistent forward progress, reported Captain Yulmuth, her clicking sounds rapid with excitement. Speed approximately 12 kilometers per hour, bearing southeast toward the northern edge. Ambassador Veltar stood before the largest display screen. His forearms crossed as he watched the tiny dot that represented Hana moving through terrain that had defeated his people's greatest expeditions. Energy storm approaching her position in Sector 7. Intensity readings are off our measurement scales. Dr. Crix floated beside him, his tentacles writhing with nervous energy as he monitored the biological sensors they had managed to aim at Hana's position. Heart rate steady at 140 beats per minute, body temperature normal. No signs of distress or system failure. On the screen, the energy storm engulfed Hana's position in a swirling mass of purple and gold distortions. Every piece of monitoring equipment in that sector immediately went offline, their sensors overwhelmed by the electromagnetic chaos. We have lost all contact with Tracking Station 7, Captain Yulmuth reported. All sensors in that sector are non-functional. How long do energy storms typically last? Park Min-ho asked. He had been given permission to observe the monitoring effort, and he stood near the back of the room trying to stay out of the way of the frantic aliens. Anywhere from 30 minutes to 6 hours, Dr. Crix replied without looking away from his instruments. Our people usually take shelter in heavily shielded bunkers and wait them out. But she is just running through it? Apparently. They waited in tense silence as the storm raged across Sector 7. When it finally began to dissipate 45 minutes later, the surviving sensors came back online one by one. Captain Yulmuth was the first to spot the small moving dot that represented Hana. Target acquired. She has maintained course and speed throughout the storm. No deviation from projected path. A collective sound went up from the aliens in the room. A mixture of amazement and disbelief expressed in a dozen different languages. Ambassador Veltar's forearms uncrossed and he leaned closer to the display screen. This should not be possible. That storm would have destroyed any unshielded technology and killed any unprotected biological organism within minutes. Maybe, Park Min-ho said thoughtfully. Human biology is more resilient than you think. Dr. Crix turned his attention from the sensor readings to Park Min-ho. Explain. Humans evolved on a planet with extreme weather, dangerous predators, and constantly changing conditions. Our bodies are designed to adapt quickly to hostile environments. All biological organisms have some adaptive capacity, Captain Yulmuth pointed out. That does not explain surviving conditions that defeat our most advanced technology. Park Min-ho moved closer to the group of senior researchers. May I show you something? Veltar gestured for him to continue, and Min-ho activated one of the smaller display screens. This is data from human athletic performance on Earth. Marathon runners routinely cover 42 kilometers in under 3 hours, even in desert conditions with temperatures over 40 degrees. 42 kilometers is impressive for a biological organism, Dr. Crix admitted, but the Wasteland is 2,000 kilometers, not 42. But humans also do ultramarathons, Minho continued, changing the display. Races of 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers, even longer. Some humans run for 24 hours straight, covering distances that would challenge most vehicles. The aliens stared at the performance data with growing amazement. Numbers and statistics showed humans routinely accomplishing feats of endurance that they had considered impossible for biological organisms. These are exceptional individuals, surely, Veltar said. Elite athletes who represent the absolute peak of human capability. Hana was a recreational runner on Earth, Minho replied. Good, but not elite. What she is doing in the Wasteland would be challenging for her, but not impossible. But how? Captain Yulmoth's clicking became more rapid. How can primitive biological systems outperform advanced technology in extreme conditions? Maybe because they are not primitive, Minho said. Human cardiovascular systems are incredibly efficient. Our cooling system through sweating is better than most mechanical systems. Our brains can process sensory information and make decisions faster than most computers when dealing with rapidly changing conditions. Dr. Crix's tentacles moved in patterns that indicated deep thought. You are suggesting that biological evolution has produced capabilities that our technology has not been able to match? I am suggesting that evolution and technology are good at different things. Technology is excellent for precise, controlled conditions, but evolution is excellent for adapting to chaos and uncertainty. On the main screen, they watched as Hana approached a section of the Wasteland where gravitational anomalies created a maze of crushing and weightless zones. Previous expeditions had lost entire vehicles in this area, crushed flat or flung into space by sudden gravity changes. Gravitational anomaly field dead ahead, Captain Yulmoth reported. Intensity variations from 0 to 12 times planetary normal, changing every few seconds. They watched as Hana entered the field and immediately began adjusting her movement. When gravity increased, she crouched low and took shorter steps. When it decreased, she bounded forward in long leaps that carried her dozens of meters with each stride. She is treating it like a game, Veltar said in amazement. Gravitational forces that would crush our vehicles, and she is using them to increase her speed. Human children play games that involve constantly changing rules and conditions, Minho explained. We call it playground equipment. Swings, slides, climbing structures that require constant balance and adaptation. Hana probably learned to handle changing gravity when she was 5 years old, just with different equipment. Dr. Crix turned away from his sensors to stare at Minho. Are you telling me that human children routinely train for conditions similar to what we encounter in the Wasteland? Not intentionally, but yes. Humans play in ways that develop exactly the skills needed for environmental adaptation. What about the reality storms? Captain Yulmoth asked. How does human biology handle quantum distortions that confuse our most sophisticated navigation systems? Before Minho could answer, the sensors detected another massive distortion approaching Hana's position. This one was even larger than the energy storm she had passed through earlier, and the quantum readings were showing impossible values. Reality. Storm intensity is beyond our measurement capacity, Dr. Crix reported. Space-time distortions are off the charts. Our instruments are reading north as simultaneously pointing in 16 different directions. On the screen, the storm engulfed Hana's position in a swirling chaos of impossible geometries and contradictory sensor readings. The tracking systems began reporting that she was simultaneously moving in 12 different directions at 12 different speeds. We have lost coherent tracking data, Captain Yulmoth announced. Target position is showing as everywhere and nowhere. But she is still in there somewhere, Minho said calmly, and she will come out the other side. How can you be so confident? Because human brains are designed to navigate by intuition when logical information is unreliable. We call it getting lost in the woods. Humans have been doing it for thousands of years and finding their way home anyway. They waited as the reality storm raged for over an hour, their instruments providing completely useless data about impossible positions and contradictory measurements. Finally, the distortions began to fade, and the sensors slowly began reporting coherent information again. "Target acquired," Captain Yulmoth announced. "She has emerged from the storm on the projected course, maintaining consistent speed. Her biological readings are still normal," Dr. Crix added. "Heart rate steady, body temperature stable, no signs of distress or confusion." Ambassador Veltar was quiet for a long moment, staring at the screen. Finally, he spoke in a voice that sounded tired and wondering. "We have spent centuries developing more sophisticated technology to overcome the challenges of hostile environments. But what if the solution was not more sophistication but less?" "What do you mean?" Captain Yulmoth asked. "What if the Wasteland is specifically hostile to complex systems? What if it evolved or was designed to defeat advanced technology while leaving simple biological organisms unharmed?" Dr. Crix's tentacles moved in slow, thoughtful patterns. "That would explain why our equipment fails while she succeeds. Our sensors, computers, and life support systems are incredibly complex. Her biological systems are relatively simple. Simple but effective," Minho added. "Evolution does not create complexity for its own sake. It creates the simplest system that can accomplish the required task. And the required task in this case is crossing 2,000 kilometers of hostile terrain," Veltar said. "Something that human biology can accomplish, but our technology cannot." "There is something else," Minho said quietly. Something. 6 months later, the Crimson Wasteland looked completely different from orbit. Where once there had been only empty red sand broken by the occasional wreckage of failed expeditions, now there were regular paths worn by steady foot traffic, supply stations built from local materials, and even a small permanent settlement right in the center of what had once been considered the most dangerous terrain in known space. Kim Ji-woo adjusted the biosuit settings on her latest client and checked the water supplies one more time. The Kelvorian scientist Dr. Hemlock was nervous about the crossing, despite the fact that dozens of aliens had now successfully made the journey using Ji-woo's biological adaptation training methods. "The suit feels strange," Dr. Hemlock said, his translator device converting his species' musical tones into standard galactic. "I do not understand how this simple equipment can protect me when our most advanced technology failed." Ji-woo smiled and made final adjustments to the biosuit's cooling system. The suits were her own invention, designed to mimic human physiological responses rather than replace them with technology. They enhanced natural biological functions instead of overwhelming them with artificial systems. "The suit does not protect you," she explained. "It helps your body protect itself. Your species evolved on a desert world, which means you have natural adaptations for extreme heat and energy fluctuations. The suit just helps you access those adaptations more effectively. But the gravitational anomalies. Your people are natural climbers and leapers. Your muscles and bones are designed for variable gravity conditions. You just need to trust your instincts instead of relying on mechanical stabilizers." Dr. Hemlock's 6 limbs moved nervously as he looked out at the wasteland. "And the reality, storms, will be confusing to your instruments but not to your brain. Kelvorian neural systems evolved to navigate through your planet's crystal forests, where light and shadow create natural optical illusions. Your brain knows how to filter out impossible sensory data and focus on what is real." This conversation had become routine for Ji-woo over the past months. Every species that came to her for wasteland crossing assistance had the same fears, the same doubts about abandoning their technological solutions in favor of biological ones. And every species discovered that they possessed natural capabilities they had forgotten they had. The change had started immediately after Hana's second crossing. Within days, research teams from across the galaxy were requesting permission to study the wasteland using primitive biological methods. Within weeks, the first non-human successful crossing had been accomplished by a young Altarian explorer who had trained with Hana for just 2 days. Now, the wasteland crossing service that Ji-woo had established was booked solid for the next year. Scientists, explorers, colonists, and even tourists were making the journey that had once been considered impossible. "Are you ready?" Ji-woo asked Dr. Hemlock. The Kelvorian scientist took a deep breath that sounded like wind chimes in his translator. "I suppose we will find out." They began jogging into the wasteland together. Jiwoo setting a pace that would challenge her client, without exhausting him. This was her 15th crossing this month, and she had learned to adjust her approach for each species' particular strengths and weaknesses. The Altarians were naturally patient and methodical, so she taught them to treat the crossing like a very long meditation. The Xanthari were analytical thinkers, so she showed them how to approach each obstacle as a physics problem that their bodies could solve intuitively. The Kelvorans were artistic and creative, so she helped them see the Wasteland as a challenging dance that required improvisation and flow. The first energy storm is approaching, she told Dr. Hemlock as purple electricity began crackling around them. Remember, your instruments will go crazy, but your body will be fine. Trust your natural senses, not your artificial ones. Dr. Hemlock's 6 limbs moved in synchronization as he adapted to the storm's effects. Jiwoo had learned that Kelvorans were naturally rhythmic movers, and the electromagnetic pulses of the energy storms actually helped them find their optimal pace rather than disrupting it. As they jogged through the storm together, Jiwoo thought about how much everything had changed since Hana's first crossing. The research station above them was now 3 times larger, filled with new laboratories dedicated to studying biological adaptation and evolutionary advantages. The Wasteland itself was becoming a center of scientific discovery rather than a barrier to exploration. But the biggest changes were happening in the broader galaxy. Species that had spent millennia focused on technological advancement were rediscovering their own biological heritage. Ancient evolutionary adaptations that had been considered obsolete were being studied and celebrated. Physical fitness and natural capability were becoming as valued as technological sophistication. Dr. Yang Suyeon, the human evolutionary biologist, who had arrived on the second research vessel, was leading a galaxy-wide project to catalog the forgotten biological capabilities of different species. Her work had revealed that almost every advanced civilization had evolutionary advantages that could solve problems their technology could not handle. The Altarians, it turned out, had evolved on a world with frequent seismic activity, giving them a natural ability to sense and navigate gravitational instabilities. The Xanthari had developed in an environment with constant electromagnetic storms, making them naturally resistant to energy field disruptions. The Kelvorans came from a world of crystal caves where navigation required intuitive pattern recognition that worked perfectly in reality storm conditions. Every species had biological superpowers that they had simply forgotten how to use. This is actually enjoyable, Dr. Hemlock said as they passed through a section of moderate gravitational anomalies. His 6 limbs were moving in a complex pattern that looked almost like dancing as he adapted to the changing forces. I had not realized that movement could be so satisfying without technological assistance. Most species discover that, Jiwoo replied. Your bodies were designed by millions of years of evolution to be incredibly capable. Technology is useful, but it should enhance biology, not replace it. They were approaching the halfway point when they encountered one of the Wasteland's newest features, a permanent settlement that Commander Cho Daeho had established 3 months earlier. The base was built entirely from local materials using construction techniques that worked with the Wasteland's strange properties rather than fighting against them. Supply Station Alpha, Jiwoo announced as they jogged up to the small cluster of buildings. Water, food, medical supplies, and communication equipment. Dr. Hemlock looked around in amazement at the thriving settlement. Humans and aliens worked together, maintaining equipment and conducting research in the heart of what had once been considered uninhabitable terrain. How is this possible? He asked. Our surveys indicated that no permanent structures could survive the energy storms and gravitational variations. They cannot if you try to build them like normal structures, Commander Cho Daeho said, emerging from the main building with a welcoming smile. But if you design them to flex and adapt like biological organisms, they work fine. The commander had become something of a legend in the past months. His engineering background, combined with insights learned from biological adaptation research, had produced construction techniques that seemed to violate several laws of physics. His buildings bent instead of breaking, conducted energy storms safely into the ground, and actually became stronger when exposed to gravitational anomalies. The Wasteland is not hostile to everything, he explained to Dr. Hemlock. It is specifically hostile to rigid, complex systems that try to impose order on chaos, but flexible, adaptive systems that work with the chaos instead of against it do just fine. After a brief rest, Jiwoo and Dr. Hemlock continued their crossing. The Kelvorian scientist's confidence had grown considerably, and he was beginning to move with the natural grace that his species possessed when they trusted their evolutionary design. "I understand now why this has changed everything," he said, as they navigated through a reality storm that made the landscape look like a surreal painting. "We have spent so long trying to transcend our biological limitations that we forgot about our biological advantages." "Exactly," Jiwoo agreed. "Advancement is not about replacing what evolution gave you. It is about understanding and enhancing what you already have." As they approached the far edge of the wasteland, Dr. Hemlock was practically bouncing with each step. The variable gravity had become a playground for his natural leaping ability, and he was covering ground with an efficiency that would have impressed his species' best athletes. "I want to do this again," he announced as they jogged onto the safe terrain beyond the wasteland. "And I want to bring my research team. If we can cross this wasteland using our natural capabilities, what other challenges might we solve by rediscovering our biological heritage?" "That," Jiwoo said, "is exactly the right question to ask." The shuttle that picked them up was piloted by Kevtar, the same Altarian who had transported Hana on her first crossing. He had since completed the crossing himself and had become one of the most enthusiastic advocates for biological exploration methods.